ViewSonic, the heart of your system.
Hi and welcome back to a new video. Finally, I have time to work on this project. It's the O11 Dynamic Mini, finally. It's still a prototype, this particular case, but technically it should be very similar with the final case, which should be available within the next days or weeks. And that's the newest creation out of the cooperation between me and Lian Li. Originally, we started with the O11 Dynamic, then we made the bigger version, the O11 Dynamic XL, and now the mini version. And what is really fascinating about this mini case is how versatile it is and how much you can actually fit in it, no matter how small it is. It's probably the best to use it with mini ITX, that's my personal opinion, but you can still use it with ATX, and it has massive amount of space for water cooling. You can place 360 in the bottom, 360 on top, and 240 in the back. And that is actually quite impressive considering the size of this case. We will do a mini ATX build today with this mainboard. That should be quite interesting, I think. And an RTX 3080. The RTX 3080 will stay on air simply because I don't have any water cooling blocks for this card yet, but should still be interesting. I'm not going to do a full case introduction, but just some key stuff for the start. We have two bays on the left, one for SFX PSU and for HDDs on the bottom. But the most fascinating part about this case is this particular part of metal. You can unscrew it with two screws on the right, two screws on the left. And now we have this piece right here, which contains the cutout for the I/O part of your mainboard and 3 expansion slots on the back. And depending how you want to orientate or place your mainboard or your entire system, you can place it right on top, in the middle, or right on the bottom. And that way you can influence how much space or clearance you have, for example, on the top or on the bottom for radiator mountings. The same thing also exists for vertical GPU mount, obviously, because the expansion slots are rotated by 90 degrees. You have a little bit less space right here. The whole thing is taller than the other mounting plate, but you can still influence if you want to have it like on the bottom or completely on top. But definitely a vertical GPU will give you less space for radiator mounting, and that's why I'm not going to use it today. But in theory, you could also mount your GPU vertically, and that's what makes this case so unique, and I'm looking forward to see all your creations out there once the O11 Dynamic Mini is available. In the accessories, you will also find those additional plates, and they are to close off the part on the bottom, part on top, depending on where you place your frame. And we also have this pump mounting plate. So for example, if you decide to mount your pump on the bottom right here, then you could do so with this piece of metal. I'm not going to use it because we want to use 360 on the bottom and 360 on top. And yeah, we'll have to figure out how we're going to mount our pump. And that is the mainboard we're going to use in today's build. Has been laying around in my office for, I don't know, like 2 years. At least that's how it feels like. It's an ASRock X299 mini ITX mainboard. And of course I know that X299, especially ITX, doesn't make much sense anymore these days. The best would be to wait 4 more weeks for the new AMD CPUs to arrive, but this board has been laying around here for such a long time and I never really did anything with it. I just want to try it out, see how this thing works out. Not even quite sure what the CPU is on there. It's an Intel Confidential sample I received a long time ago. It should be a 10-core CPU. We'll find out. It's just a fun build to play along with the case a little bit to see how this thing works out with mini ITX. So yeah, it's nothing I would recommend to repeat when it comes to mainboard or CPU choice, but just going to be for fun. I mean, just look at this crazy PCB design. What you can see right here, this heatsink underneath, we have the VRM of the CPU, and at the same time, there is like an extension card attached to it, which contains SATA connection and also USB 3.0 connection for the case. In the rear area, there is another expansion PCB, which is also called X299 ITX rear PCB, and this one contains the M.2 slot. In this case we're using a PNY Accelerate SSD, which I haven't tested before. We'll also do that in today's video. This is the expansion PCB I was just talking about. First you could think that it's an SODIMM slot. I mean, it is an SODIMM slot, but you could assume that it's for memory sticks, but it's just for this expansion PCB right here. Those Ballistix memory modules have a speed of 3200 MHz. They can run in quad channel on this platform, 3200 MHz speed and 64 GB capacity in total. Mainboard in place, fitted the VGA just for testing purposes. By the way, I put a water cooling fitting between the radiator and the VGA because otherwise it's sagging down so hard. It doesn't look healthy. I will have to figure out or think of a solution for that to kind of give the VGA a little bit of extra stability once it's in place. But this way we can kind of figure out and get an idea of the placement between, or the clearance between the radiator and the VGA. Should be sufficient for normal fan height. In the back we're going to use a 240 radiator. Technically you could also fit a 280 in there just by looking at the mounting distances of those cutouts. But I will go for 240 just because we have 360 in the bottom, 360 in top later, and then we will have all the same fan sizes. I think it will just look better if we have the same fan size everywhere. All the radiators and fans are in place. I have a 360 bottom, 360 top, 240 in the back, and also a 120mm fan as exhaust in the back right here. Also mounted the PSU already using a Corsair SF750 SFX PSU for this build. And now you can see this metal shield right here, which is like an extension for the part internally. If you're using an ATX board, then you have to use those kind of standoffs on the right. But if you use like an ITX or DTX board, which is like an extended ITX, this is not required. But first I thought it would be cool to use it because it's kind of cool to hide the cables underneath, like the fan cable down there. But then I figured out that it's hiding too much of the ATX 24-pin cable. It wouldn't be long enough to fit it into the PSU anymore. That's why I have to remove this shield, and then we'll do all the cabling. Meanwhile, I laser cut this tiny piece of acrylic, L-shaped, with 2 holes in top, also countersunk them. And all Asus 3080, 3090 cards, for some reason, have those 2 holes with M3 thread in the back. I'm just going to attach this right here. And in the end, this should be placed somewhere like this and give a lot of support to the card. And due to the fact that it's matte acrylic, shouldn't be that visible. I'm using some gear from Watercool, aka Heatkiller, again for the reservoir and pump combination. It's pretty much the same stuff I used already for Project Irrationality. I just absolutely love their build quality. It's probably some of the best stuff you can get for water cooling supply. Also love the fact that it's made in Germany. There is this small arm included, or 2 of them, which can be attached to those aluminium rods on the side. And then I have those POM adapters, which I can attach to the fans, and this way mount the reservoir to the fans on the bottom right. The mounting has those rubber mountings on the back, and you can see I can even move the fan attachment bracket a little bit. That's because of the rubber in between, and that's very nice for decoupling all kind of vibrations that are coming from the pump. And they also bolt on right onto the fan where we have rubber in addition, and that should give us a very nice decoupling. The only part where I have to complain is that those cables were not sleeved from the pump. Did that manually, and now looks much better. We're getting there. You can see the reservoir pump combination is in place, the VGA is also installed. The cap of the reservoir is still missing. If you configure those reservoirs in their online shop from Watercool, you can get this additional top, which is not a standard top. The standard one is just something you can open on top to fill the reservoir, but this one also allows to have the fittings on top. Now I only have to decide if I'm going to mount it this way or like this way. We'll have to figure that out. Same thing goes for the CPU block, if it's going to be mounted this way or rotated by 90 degrees. That moment when you realize you forgot to perform your BIOS update because the board has been laying around in your office for years and Cascade Lake X is not compatible, but I'm too lazy to mount like the water cooler again. That's why I have to press this air cooler on the CPU for, I don't know, feels like half an hour. And I just received some new toys to play with. Gigabyte sent this G32WQC 34-inch monitor over to me for some testing. 1500R radius, which means that it's quite heavily curved. 144 Hz, 21:9, obviously. That's going to be interesting. The thing was, in one of my last monitor test videos, it was also a Gigabyte curved monitor. I said that I'm not really a fan anymore of the curved monitors. I went back personally to a 4K 27-inch monitor, which I find much better. Previously, I was using a 21:9 monitor 34-inch, which is pretty much the same, but it was a very old generation. It's like 4 years old, 5 years old, I can't even remember. And Gigabyte said, hey, why don't you just take a look at one of the recent 34-inch monitors with 144 Hz. Alright, let's check it out. The system is fully set up right now, and I just love how this looks with those matte black Corsair tubes with the chrome finish Corsair fittings. I think, yeah, together with the white looking fans, looks absolutely brilliant. Very, very nice design, I think, and very stylish. It's also very quiet. All the fans are currently running at 600 RPM. I mean, we have a ton of radiators in there and they are just cooling the CPU right now. The CPU is a 10900X Cascade Lake X10 core CPU, which is clocked at 4.8 GHz, 1.26 volt. Not too aggressive. I could probably squeeze another 100 MHz out of the CPU, but then I would need quite a bit more V-core for it. Yeah, let's see how this performs. Just running 3D Mark right now. By the way, I know that we're running some SO-DIMMs in there, but it's still 128 GB of memory running at 3200 MHz speed. Excuse me. Dr. Sheik is also checking out what's going on. Cooling wise, the bottom fans are intake fans, mainly because the VGA is sitting directly above, and otherwise it would be counterproductive having the fans spinning in the other direction. It's cooling or helping, assisting the VGA a little bit. Then we have two 120mm fans in the back radiator pushing air outside, same as the fan in the back and the fans on top. Performance-wise, we have 8400 points in Time Spy Extreme, graphics score 8900 points, CPU score 6300 points. It's a little bit CPU bottlenecked, and that's mainly because we only have 10 cores with 16 or like, I don't know, 32 cores. Obviously, it would be much better when it comes to the CPU score alone, but it's pretty in line for a gaming system. The GPU temperature was maximum 65 degrees Celsius, which makes sense because it's all fan controlled, and the fan speed was maximum of 2000 RPM. To give you an indication, the CPU was running stock, by the way. Maximum VRM temperature of the board 76 degrees Celsius, which I think is fine for an overclocked CPU considering how small the heatsink of this board is, and the maximum CPU temperature was 90 degrees Celsius on 2 of those cores. In Cinebench R20 Multi, just below 6000 points, which is kind of as expected. Maximum VRM temperature 81 degrees Celsius, and the CPU was getting a little toasty with maximum of 94 degrees Celsius. Obviously there is still headroom in cooling because all the fans are fixed at 600 RPM. If I spin them up to like, I don't know, 1200, 1300, then I would be able to drop the water temperature and improve the temperatures, but I think this is fine for this testing. Let's check gaming. About the G34WQC monitor from Gigabyte, I can definitely feel a difference between this one with 144 Hz versus my 100 Hz Asus monitor. You can absolutely feel that there are like 4 or 5 years of development in between, and just by looking at an image like this with some fast moving images or just moving your mouse cursor, then I can already tell a difference. Can easily adjust it in height, as you can see. You can also tilt it depending on how you need it. Temperature wise, also quite okay. The CPU is always sitting somewhere between 55 and 60 degrees Celsius. The CPU load wise 20 to 50%. The GPU is about 70 degrees Celsius with a load of typically 95%, and the CPU load is quite low, which indicates that we're not CPU bottlenecked, which is a good sign. Makes sense because of the resolution and also the VGA. FPS wise, we are always or mostly in the region between 150 and 220 FPS, average 180, and that should be sufficient for a 144 Hz monitor like this. We are at the end of our O11 Dynamic Mini PC build. I'm very happy with the result. Considering how much you can squeeze in such a tiny case, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, we have 2 times a 360, we have a 240 radiator in the back. You can squeeze in a mini ITX board. Just think about the upcoming 5950X CPU, the 16-core AMD Ryzen, and pair this with a 3080, 3090 GPU. I mean, with this radiator space, you can easily water cool the CPU and the GPU together, because just think about the Cascade Lake X CPU easily has like 200 watt power consumption, and your AMD CPU has like, I don't know, 120, maybe 130. I know the TDP is lower, but it will consume a little bit more, obviously. So I'm very happy about the O11 Dynamic Mini, considering how much you can squeeze in there, how versatile it is, with in which ways you can mount your mainboard, like down, in the middle, up, and also vertical GPU mount. I'm very curious to see your builds out there. Leave me feedback about this case down below. Considering the monitor, the G34WQC monitor, I'm still not that big a fan of curved monitors. The monitor itself, just from a neutral perspective, I think is absolutely fine. You have 34 inches with a high resolution, 134 Hz, and in Germany this monitor is 450 euro, which is, I think, an absolutely affordable price for what you get, considering how much those type of monitors cost, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And that's why I think it's a fair choice. If you're into 21:9 monitors, then this might be your choice. I will stay with 27 inches 4K and just flat screen. It's more my thing. All right, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye bye.